From Move It to Living Doll, from Summer Holiday to Mistletoe and Wine, Cliff Richard's voice once encapsulated the aspirations and disappointments of a whole generation. A youth rebel turned chart icon, he ascended from a ship departing British India to dominate Britain's airwaves. The first homegrown rock idol before the Beatles had even strummed their first chords. With hit upon hit and even box office hits such as The Young Ones, Cliff appeared to be unstoppable. Yet behind the dazzling career, there had been a quiet, committed faith Impossible Loves, and a scandal that had almost ruined him decades on. As other icons fizzled out, he went on for 65 years, waging battles that no one ever knew about. From bloody fans to the courtroom, Cliff Richard's tale is an affirmation that even the most enormous stars have secrets that transform their lives. Harry Roger Webb was born on October 14th, 1940 in Lucknow, British India, at a time when the world itself appeared to be crumbling. World War II was raging, colonial authority was being threatened throughout the empire, and British households were holding on to a life that soon would be gone. Harry was born into a humble home in which his father toiled for the railways, only managing to achieve sufficient stability as the world beyond teetered. His mother Dorothy held the family close, attending to their daily needs in a company housing flat in just outside Kolkata. Harry's earliest years were filled with the din of trains, the smell of spice bazaars, and the sounds of a culture he would eventually have to leave. But the British Empire in India was breaking down rapidly. Riots and brutality flared up during the last battle for freedom in 1946, and his parents reluctantly decided to abandon ship. They stowed their dreams in steamer trunks and set sail on the SS Ranch with hundreds of other departing colonial families. The 3-week journey across the Indian Ocean brought them from the sultry heat of the subcontinent to the rainy climate and ration books of post-war England. When they arrived in Surrey, the Webbs found it difficult to cope with a nation shaken by bombing sorties and still in the process of rebuilding its morale. The spacious, comfortable living areas of India were a memory. They crowded into a semi-detached house, having to do with less. Harry, who had moved to local schools, completed his education at Stanley Park Juniors and Chess Hunt Secondary Modern. He was a standout in English literature, but bore with him a quiet, gnawing feeling that he must prove himself in this new world. Music was his refuge. At 16, his father purchased him a guitar, sowing a spark that would transform everything. Harry soon became a part of school bands such as the Quintons, then experimented with playing with the Dick Teague Skiffle Group, gigging in church halls and community centers wherever they would allow him to plug his inexpensive amplifier in. Before long, the bug for performing had taken over. He created a rock and roll band named the Drifters, not the American doo-wop group, but a tough local band in pursuit of the same rhythm. This band would be the springboard to his fate. A manager by the name of Harry Grader X informed him bluntly that Harry Webb would never be a rock star and advised him to pick something tougher. Spurred by the irresistible energy of a cliff wall, the teenager chose Cliff, and inspired by his idol Little Richard, tacked on Richard as a surname. In 1958, he cut what was intended to be a B-side, Move It, a song penned by bandmate Ian Samwell, on a bus. The record burst onto the charts, reaching number 2 and providing Britain with its first authentic rock and roll anthem, raw, British, and rebellious. It wasn't long before Cliff Richard's popularity took off. By 1959, Living Doll was his first number 1, holding on to the top of the charts for 6 weeks and selling almost 800,000 copies. With his group renamed The Shadows to escape lawsuits with America's Drifters, Cliff dominated radio waves and teenagers' hearts in equal proportion. Meanwhile, he took a bold step on the big screen by appearing in Serious Charge, a tale of moral panic and false accusations, going out on themes no other pop idol would dare. In the succeeding years, Cliff cemented his position at the very top with successes such as Travelin' Light, A Voice in the Wilderness, and Please Don't Tease. However, 1963 saw the pinnacle moment with Summer Holiday, a film so popular that its soundtrack was on top of the UK album chart for 14 consecutive weeks. Despite the Beatles bursting onto the scene, Cliff was not about to give up the top spot. 6 top 10 singles in 1964 alone, more than the Beatles themselves, as theaters were filled with screaming fans and people ripped their hair out to reach him. The New Musical Express even voted him the world's best male singer, better than Lennon and McCartney, a phenomenal win. Cliff Richard had become the hero of a generation, the first true British rock and roll icon, and a pop culture heavyweight. Yet, as he grinned for the lens and served up hits, few perceived the solitude beneath the glossed-over smile. An Indian boy who bore family responsibilities, a feeling of obligation, and the impossible weight of needing to be Britain's ideal idol rebelled against fame with unbreakable belief. For all but a few rock stars, the 60s consisted of rebellion, drugs, and a sex and party ride. Cliff Richard would not be a part of that script. At Earl's Court in June 1966, alongside American evangelist Billy Graham, he announced to thousands of stunned followers that he was a born-again Christian. It was a bombshell. British tabloids were not believed when they reported it, and music industry insiders speculated that Cliff would retire and become a teacher rather than a rock star. His belief had begun to grow quietly 2 years before, but announcing it in public amidst the swinging 60s youth culture came as a surprise. Cliff himself later confessed that he considered giving up music altogether, feeling that a real Christian could not remain in show business. For a while he almost did, but something inside him changed. He chose to continue singing, but on his own terms. Cliff became the first prominent British pop artist to marry chart domination with devout religious faith, defying his detractors who claimed he had destroyed his career. He would not play the tortured artist game, confessing he had been hiding behind a hard rock facade all those years. He had never destroyed a hotel room, never laid waste to a dressing room, never had a desire to blunt his senses with pills or alcohol. Some declared him dull. Cliff referred to it as freedom. From then on, he offset radio-friendly ballads with personal candor that maintained the fans' attention. He even participated in the UK-wide Festival of Light protest in 1971, opposing the increasing popularity of sexually explicit movies and what he perceived as moral decline alongside such controversial figures as Mary Whitehouse. Throughout it all, he did not apologize for his morals. Meanwhile, the hits continued. Cliff had a Christmas #1 with Mistletoe and Wine in 1988 and another one with Savior's Day in 1990, both marking a message of hope during a period when pop was becoming cynical. However, in low moments, Cliff revealed that living according to his faith cost him something. It meant constant suspicion, jokes about being a square, and the pain of knowing he might always stand alone against an industry that often celebrated destruction over decency. Even when Cliff's stardom appeared invincible, his personal life was filled with solitary decisions and lost opportunities. In 1961, following the death of his father at only 56, Cliff had to become the pillar for his mother and sisters. He subsequently confessed that bereavement brought him closer to his family, but also strengthened his resolve to continue his career regardless. Meanwhile, around that time, he became smitten with Dahlia Wixes, an Australian dancer, and wrote a tearful letter to her explaining that he had to take the stage instead of building a life with her. Cliff begged her to get someone else who could love her entirely because he felt trapped in show business and his family's requirements. When Dahlia passed away from cancer in 2010, her brother shared that she never got over being heartbroken over Cliff's choice. Within a year, Cliff briefly dated actress Una Stubbs and then fell head over heels for dancer Jackie Irving, whom he described as totally beautiful, before once more leaving without committing. By the early 80s, Cliff appeared ready to at last settle down with tennis queen Sue Barker, whom he met in 1982. Their romance was splashed across headlines, and Cliff even spoke of marriage. But again, he drew back, declaring that he did not love her sufficiently to make it for all eternity. Cliff frequently said that touring and stardom left no time for an actual marriage, and he would not give just half of himself to anyone else. The rumor mill never ceased to turn with inquiries regarding his homosexuality trailing behind him for decades, which he staunchly denied, calling them extremely unfair and hurtful. Cliff declared he just was not motivated by sex, but by religion, music, and devotion to his family. He was knighted in 1995 for his charity and services to music, an accolade he bore with subdued pride. His philanthropic efforts, giving 1/10 of his income via tithing since 1966, and his contributions to Tearfund research into Alzheimer's and children's tennis centers had gained him an unusual respect outside the charts. Cliff had demonstrated you could live clean, remain generous, and retain a rock and roll heart. While radio stations and young reporters ridiculed him as too old or too square, Cliff would not adapt to their type. He defended dedication, respect, and the principle that faith was not weakness. When radio ignored him, famously excluding the Millennium Prayer, Cliff's loyalists rallied instead, pushing the single to #1 for 3 weeks in 1999, showing he did not require airplay to be significant. Later on, when Christmas time came about, numbers such as Mistletoe and Wine and Savior's Day still returned him to living rooms each year. Cliff once boasted that he was the most extreme rock and roll singer Britain has ever known because he never ransacked hotel rooms or permitted wild addictions. He revolted by living high. In a culture where youth culture celebrated devastation, Cliff represented hope. And in doing so, he did something much greater than become a fleeting idol. He became an emblem of the bravery to be good despite everything. As Cliff Richard approached his 9th decade, he reflected on a life of victories and scars with unflinching candor. In 2010, he assured that he was no longer resident in the UK, a citizen of Barbados, but fiercely claiming to remain British forevermore. From his Portuguese villa to concert halls on tour, Cliff continued to perform with a voice that was still powerful enough to resonate in Wembley, as it had since 1989. He remained a committed uncle and friend, even going so far as to help raise funds for hospitals after his nephew Philip recovered from a near-deadly illness. Cliff acknowledged that occasionally the rumors of his bachelor ways still stung, but he had come to terms with his decisions, feeling that his freedom was what allowed him to give everything to his fans. When close friend Cilla Black passed away in 2015, he played Faithful One at her funeral, tearfully singing. He commented that losing her as he had lost Olivia was like losing part of his heart, but he never relinquished his faith that love, either romantic or friendly, had been at the heart of all he had done. Through heartbreaks, scandals, and betrayals, Cliff had remained steadfast, demonstrating a clean life was not dull, and kindness was not a sign of weakness. In his 2008 autobiography, he urged the church to endorse same-sex commitment, demonstrating a tolerance that had matured with age. In a sense, he had defied all his life not against rules, but against cruelty and tawdry fame. Cliff Richard's tale, from a boy alighting from a boat from Lucknow to a man fighting his reputation in the High Court, is one of survival. His voice, once the hymn of shrieking teenagers, now holds a more subdued legacy. That dignity, battered though it may be, can still stand tall. So, having heard his tale, what do you make of Cliff Richard? Do you view him as an actual hero who held firm, or a victim who paid too heavy a price for stardom? Let us know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible true stories.